A land of stunning coastline, expansive forests, serene lakes and rivers, the iconic Fundy Coast, red sandstone cliffs, spectacular vistas, beaches, and tidal powers. This is Cycling New Brunswick. My cycle across Canada resumed in the town of Campbellton. After taking a day off to wait out some rains, I headed out along quiet roads following the northeast coast of the province. But this was no ordinary day. Hurricane Fiona was barreling towards the Maritimes and about to make landfall as the most intense post-tropical cyclone in Canadian history. I was cruising along above 30 kilometers an hour without pedaling. Thank you, Hurricane Fiona Tailwind. Headed towards Miramichi, came from Campbellton. It'll be about a 208 kilometer day. Just decided to push through because of Hurricane Fiona. Oh, look at this sunset. Wow! Yee-hoo! East of this location was the Acadian Peninsula, with its rich history and hundreds of kilometers of velo route, but forecasted storm surge and high winds were too much of a safety concern to head there this time. Apart from a brief moment to take in the beautiful sunset, I spent the day putting in some big distance to get to the city of Miramichi and take shelter in a hotel for the night as the winds picked up and howled throughout the night. The eye of the storm hit much harder to the east of New Brunswick, but high winds still persisted through the morning. Thanks to the position of the eye and the counterclockwise storm rotation, more incredible tailwinds blew me quickly down the highway. And the tailwind right now is just amazing. I arrived in Kouchibouguac National Park under a stupendous sunset sky. Dodging a few fallen trees on the trail, I set up camp in the middle of the campground field, away from any potential falling trees. The winds, however, died down in the night, the skies cleared, and the stars came out as a welcome calm returned to the Maritimes. Morning brought bright blue skies and low winds. Storm surge the previous day had thrown debris and sand on the seaside trail, but still it was possible to walk out to the large barrier island beach for some quiet contemplation as I gazed out upon the waters of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Due to the storm, many trees had fallen over the trails in the park, and it was quite an adventure in bike lifting just to make it through and exit. After a quick stop in the town of Kouchibouguac, I headed inland, riding westward towards the quiet center of the province on Route 116. Moo! 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 In New Brunswick's vast interior, forests stretched to the horizon, interrupted only by the scars of logging slashes. I spent a night camped off of one of the many logging roads, then resumed along empty ways under drizzly skies. The vast forested expanses meant endless hours turning the pedals, discovering the patterns of trees, and meditating through the simple act of cycling. The skies cleared once more, and I arrived on a beautiful evening to Grand Lake. Where a beautiful red Northern Lights display shone briefly in the sky before fading quickly to stars as I settled in for a peaceful sleep. The quiet country roads joined up with Highway 105 as I cycled upstream along the St. John River en route to the provincial capital of Fredericton. A crossing of an old rail bridge converted to mixed-use trail brought me to the edge of downtown. After 3 more minutes of cycling, I had reached the other side of the city, so I turned around and headed out on a fantastic bike path back downstream adjacent to the river. I spent the night near Oromocto. The trail here offered wonderful tranquility despite its proximity to the hum and noise of the cities close by. Heading south, I opted to follow the River Valley Scenic route, one of the scenic drives promoted by the province. This was marked by fiddlehead signs and followed close to the St. John River on Route 102 with spectacular peaceful road and magnificent vistas. Dramatic weather brought rain clouds in the afternoon. Sun-drenched sheets of rain fell in the distance, and a beautiful rainbow emerged to cap off the day as I closed in on the city of St. John. Yahoo! Look at this! I arrived in town in the late evening and was hosted for a wonderful night of rest. The morning led over the famous Reversing Falls, which due to the tides at the time was unfortunately flowing downstream, as rivers normally do. I quickly left the city, and then it was on to the Fundy coastal route. The Bay of Fundy is nearly 300 kilometers in length, with a 100-kilometer wide mouth, and is most famous for having the highest tides in the world. At spots near the end of the bay, the tidal range can be as high as 16 meters. During any tidal cycle, the volume of water flowing through the mouth of the bay surpasses the collective flow of the entire world's rivers. The red cliffs that line the bay were formed starting hundreds of millions of years ago, as an ancient mountain range gradually eroded. Sediments coalesced in basins and eventually compressed into soft red sandstone, which over time formed the cliffs seen today. These same sediments also give the waters of the bay their signature reddish-brown color. The roads following close to the coast were quite spectacular, passing through old wooden-covered bridges and beside quiet beaches and bays with barely any traffic. Here at Quaco Head, the force of the tidal current is so strong that during peak tidal changes, small islands close to the shore form rapids around them. An awesome display of the pure power of the bay's tides. In the evening, I arrived to the town of St. Martin's, with its iconic sea caves and beach. I celebrated my 28th birthday here, eating lobster rolls and camping above tide line on the beach as the Milky Way shone above and the tides came in. In the morning, I left St. Martin's, crossing the Irish River on the Vaughan Creek covered bridge. After being restored, this iconic double covered bridge had only been reopened a few weeks prior. It's also the only double covered bridge in New Brunswick and is even complete with an additional pedestrian walkway. Just leaving St. Martin's, climbed up the first big hill, headed towards the Fundy Parkway. My God, look at this place. Absolutely stunning. The Fundy Parkway is a paid access park, with a main road stretching 30 kilometers up and down steep hills along the dramatic coast. A multi-use trail also runs Parkway that, while exhilarating to ride, was overly steep in sections and quite an adventure in bike pushing. After crossing the Big Simon River, the rideable portion of the trail ended, and it was on to the big climbs and descents of the paved road. With spectacular panoramic views of the Bay of Fundy and lengthy descents with grades reaching above 15%, it was an incredibly joyous road to ride. After exiting the park, I joined with the newly paved Shediac Road, traversing through more expansive forest, connecting the Parkway to Fundy National Park. With the day getting late, I carried on quickly back to the coast. Anti-crepuscular rays streamed toward the east as I flew downhill to the town of Alma. I was lucky enough to book one of the last spots in the National Park campground just outside of town and spent a nice night in the comfort and safety of the designated campsite. The morning led away once more from the touristy hotspots of the Fundy parks and again along quiet roads close to the coast. Crossing these rivers near the end of the flood tide, the water flowed upstream, filling up the tidal river basins with the mud-brown sedimented water from the bay. Cape Enraged lived up to its name, with an iconic lighthouse perched above the cliffs, while waves crashed dramatically on the jagged rocks below. The evening brought me through the calm lands of Mary's Point, part of Shediac National Wildlife Area, an important migratory bird hotspot and feeding ground, and then onto the Anderson Hollow Lighthouse and Harvey Bank Heritage Shipyard. This bay used to be a major shipbuilding center in the late 1800s, and a replica shell of a boat has been placed as a monument to that. It also made for the perfect shelter for a night of wild camping. In the morning, a short ride brought me to the famous Hopewell Rocks. These towering flowerpot structures have been formed from the endless power of the tides, carving away at the soft sedimentary rock. At low tide, it's possible to walk amongst the towers, while at high tide, all of this is inundated by water, and the only means of exploration is by kayak, well above the height of where people are standing now. After a stressful narrow road to Moncton, which got much busier than shown in this clip, I went to see one of the most unique natural phenomenon to witness here. It already looks like the tide's coming in. Tidal Bore should be coming in about 15 minutes, so go to the viewing platform. Moncton lies about 30 kilometers up the Kouchibouguac River from its mouth at the Bay of Fundy. With the incoming flood tide, the amount of water being forced up the tidal river produces a rushing wave. This is able to be reliably predicted within about 15 minutes, and is well worth planning to see. During extreme tides, the tidal bore wave can be as high as 1 meter. So now the tidal bore has come in. This river is now flowing upstream. Pretty neat. Now having crossed the Kouchibouguac River, I briefly followed it on trail back downstream, and then it was off on quiet highway in the direction of Shediac. Here I stopped in reverence of the world's biggest lobster, met some relatives in town for dinner, and then found a quiet spot hidden on the beach to settle in and watch the stars on my final night in New Brunswick. An aurora show danced on the horizon, and the waves crashed gently on the shore. In less than an hour of riding that afternoon, I'd gone from the extreme tides of the Bay of Fundy and back to the meter or so range found in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The final day of riding brought me along quiet roads in the direction of PEI. There was a lot more visible storm surge damage from Hurricane Fiona here, with broken sections at the edge of roads and tidal grasses pushed up and over the road in many places. I rode out to Cape Germain to catch a close-up glimpse of the Confederation Bridge, which I would cross to get to Prince Edward Island. This 12.9 kilometer long bridge is an engineering marvel and is also the longest bridge in the world over ice-covered water. Cycling is not allowed on the bridge, so it was back to the pickup point at the highway interchange. After an hour or so wait, I finally found myself in the shuttle, moving strangely fast and en route to Prince Edward Island.